Hi, everyone. It is Raghu. I'm back with Mindrolling, and I'm with very old, and when we say old, we are old. Ram Dev, Dale Borglum. Hi, Ram Dev.
Howdy, Raghu.
So we were just together a little bit ago, and spent some time talking about usually as we do, we get together and the odd thing will come up. Oh, you remember when we did this, that, or the other when we were in India back then? And on top of that, Ramdev, I found some diary because in this big move that I've done from the east to the west coast, finding all kinds of things that I haven't seen in ages, and there was you in a description of being at Muktananda's ashram in Ganesh Puri in 1971. And in it, you said, yeah, so I met a couple of people, Raghu being one of them, while I was waving the thing over the Murti. God.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I mean, while I was there, Muktananda had a Murti of Nityananda made, and they installed it at the ashram. And then they chose three people out of all the yogis to be the pujaris for the new Nityananda Murti. And one was me, and one was Vishu McGee, and one was some other guy. So two out of the three people were not even
Part of the thing.
Muktananda devotees. They were Nityananda people. And that was the time. That's a really interesting story. I don't know if you want me to get into a story.
Yeah, we're just here hanging out, Ramdev.
So anyway, I ended up going to India not knowing quite what I was going to do. And I had been going to Stanford before I went to India. Ram Dass, whenever he would come to Northern California, would stay across the street from my house at Joel Waldman's house. Joel is the guy that Ram Dass knew from Millbrook. So he would come and give talks in Northern California. He'd stay across the street. He and I got to be drinking buddies when I was a graduate student. I thought I was the luckiest yogi in America. And I got my PhD and I'm off to India. And at that point, it didn't seem like Maharaji was available. In fact, Ram Dass had said that I should go and be with Haridas Baba. And before I was going to leave, Haridas sent me a telegram. You remember those things called telegrams?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Saying, I'm coming to America if you want to study with me. Do not come to India. Stay where you are. I'm coming to Davis, California. So I was in a big quandary. Should I go to India where I didn't really know anybody? Or should I stay there and be with the guy that Ram Dass said was my connection? And it was like, I really didn't know. And I just got as deep as I could. And I said, I've got to go to India. I've got to leap into the void here. And I ended up going to Ganesh Puri because I had known Muktananda a bit. And eventually, as I say, they installed this Murti. And it was a really big deal. The Shankaracharya came. And Ram Dass was there. And Muktananda's main devotee, this guy, Rudy, Swami Rudrananda, was there. And the deal was, were you there for this? I don't know if you were.
I was. We talked about that when you were here, actually.
Okay.
I have some images from that time, and you're one of them.
Okay. So anyway, Rudy was, he was the number one devotee. And he said, I'm going to take a nap before this installation. Would you Muktananda people wake me up in time for the big moment, right? So he takes a nap. They don't wake him up. Muktananda puts Ram Dass up next to him on the stage. Ram Dass, Muktananda, Shankaracharya. Rudy sleeps through the whole thing. He wakes up. He is so mad. It's like the steam is coming out of his ears, right? And he ends up, he leaves. That was the end of his relationship with Muktananda.
Right. Because they didn't wake him up. I love that. That's so great.
Shiva has his ways, doesn't he?
Yes. Yeah. Which brings me to another point that I wanted to mention or chat with you about. I've been doing a lot of podcasts in and around the way in which we are glued to our stories, and that which results from it can be cause some real unhappiness. And so, yeah, I really want your take. I mean, we have a lot of spiritual aphorisms to handle this thing in terms of what we can say to somebody and help in terms of them getting loose from that belief system, basically. So give me your take on what that is and how we get a little loose from it.
Well, there's so many ways to talk about
That's
that.
like Rudy was in a story there. Rudy, you know, he was having people put his shoes on left and right, right?
Right.
He was in a real guru kind of story, as far as I could see back at that day, in that day. And then his story is, I fell asleep. They didn't wake me up. I'm gone. And then, right?
Right. Well, in Vajrayana Buddhism, they have a slogan: drive all blames into oneself," which sounds pretty harsh, and it's not a very good translation. I've never figured out a better one.
Mm,
But the notion is, as long as you're blaming the outside for what's going on, the outside can even be your own body. You're blaming they didn't wake me up, or you're blaming the political situation in our country, or you're blaming the traffic or the weather. As long as you're blaming something outside, healing cannot happen. So you withdraw the blame, you take responsibility so you can respond. And I teach this healing paradigm, which is roughly based on the three yanas of Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana. So Hinayana is learning to trust. You take refuge. You trust that all you've got to do is be present. That awareness will heal, will point toward healing, and that sounds simple, but it means letting go of the story, so
mm,
that you're feeling something and you're saying, "Oh, these people didn't do this and they didn't do that." And as long as you're in the story, you're really not being present with your living situation.
and righteousness is involved in all
Yeah,
of it.
there's righteousness, judgment, criticism. Uh, I've heard tell that Ram Dass has a new movie called Becoming Nobody.
Yes.
And that title is really about the fact that, in a very fundamental level, there isn't a solid, separate being there, that is a delusion. It's a real delusion. I remember when somebody asked Maharaji, "Is life real? Is this world real?" He says, "Well, it's completely real, it's completely false, and it's part both." Right?
Really?
Yeah, he said that.
Wow.
So I mean, to me, it's like the Heart Sutra: form is emptiness, emptiness
Mm,
is form.
mm,
And everybody's pretty much caught in form is form. We don't see that spacious, empty quality. We're always caught up in what's going on here. How can I fix it? And it's easy to talk about this stuff in a more Buddhist sense, but from a more devotional sense, can we have the faith when something happens to let go of the story and realize that this is the mother in one of her forms? One of my favorite pictures is the back of Maharaji's head looking at Durga.
yeah.
And she's kind of out of focus there, and the back of his head is really in focus. And that's kind of where we are. We're seeing the mother, but she's kind of out of focus. It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
we're thinking she's real. So
yeah.
healing: can you be present? Can you be with what's going on? Can you be embodied? Let go of the story. Step one. Step two: have compassion. Can you not only be with what it feels like to just sleep through the main thing of your life, but to have compassion for how upset you're getting?
Yeah.
And then three, the tantric perspective, that
Vajrayana.
even this is sacred, even this is the
Mm,
mother, even this crazy thing is the mother. And in the West, we often think of the mother or the deity as this really loving being you'd like to have cocktails with or something, right? But in Hinduism and Buddhism, there are these like really wrathful, difficult beings. And actually, in Hinduism, they say that the two deities that will give you darshan most quickly. What do you think they are? You want to take a guess?
I only can guess at the mother.
Hanuman and Durga,
Yeah.
because Hanuman's a cuddly monkey, but he's really Shiva.
Mm.
And Durga's this beautiful woman, but she's really the same as Kali. So you come sidling up, oh, you're this cute monkey, oh, you're this beautiful woman. And you get up nice and close. Whereas with Kali, you say, Shiva, you say, well, I don't want to get too close to you. You come up and all of your impurities get devoured.
Okay, those are so that's Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana, interpreted into some plain spoken. What? Let's go. The three of things are again
Invocation. You're invoking that all you need to do is be present. From the Dzogchen perspective,
trust.
The essential quality of Hinayana is taking refuge. You're trusting that all you need to do is be present. And then, as you trust that you can be present, you begin to see how suffering's arising. You're not trying to run away from it all the time. And as you form this better relationship with painful emotion, with suffering, compassion, the second stage, Mahayana, begins to arise. And the nature of the heart is boundlessness. It's sky-like. The heart is as big as the sky. So as the sky becomes bigger and bigger, the I thought, even though it remains, is only one little thing in the vastness of the sky. It's not predominant anymore. And because the sky is so big and the I is so small, then empowerment begins to rise naturally. That God is smart enough not to give us this power until we've gone through the initiations of invocation and compassion. And we see in our society what happens to people who get power, like athletes and political figures and entertainment figures who have not cultivated awareness and compassion. It's like very, very tricky and seductive.
Yeah.
So fortunately for you and us, we have not gotten a lot of power because we're still working on the compassion.
Yes. Thanks to God. Oh boy. Okay, so no, I love this, Ram Dev, because it really is, as I said before, a very practical brew that easy for people to recognize and move into. And by the way, because we just mentioned, and we're going to mention it more, Becoming Nobody, the Ram Dass film that's out at the beginning of September across the country. Go to becomingnobody.com, by the way, if anybody wants to know where they can see it in their city. And since we are talking about becoming nobody, I had a thought, because I've been talking about this in panels, as you know. And so I say, there's a couple of perspectives. And one of the perspective of what that is, becoming nobody, is when I met Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji. When we met him, there was a definitive, oh my God, I have this, there's nobody to go back and forth with here. There is no relational thing the way that I've known it all my life. And it was a shock to realize there was just a pool there to be in, and that whatever that was did the right thing. I knew it was doing the right thing for me in whichever way I needed it. But basically, and Ram Dass says it in the film at one point, he wasn't really anybody. And so of course it is a rarity, even though there certainly have been beings like him, maybe not that many. We were fortunate, and for me also, meeting another nobody was the 16th Karmapa is the one that comes to mind right away. So then there's the other level that we can aspire to, which is, we use Ram Dass because it's this movie. Here is somebody who, and I use Ram Dev, my first meeting with Ram Dass, where he put himself aside, not consciously, but there was nobody there. There was just me, total attention to me. And I never really had that kind of a thing happen, maybe when I was a baby or something. And that was engendered incredible trust. So really, it was your thing of meeting, the Hinayana concept of trust and presence.
Yeah.
and awareness. And I never had that before. So there is a way for us to aspire to that as well. And I think this movie really spells it out in terms of being able to just see that the minute we turn away from this, what we've been talking about, this glued to our story, and somebody else is there, and you have nothing but to offer them yourself in that moment, that me, that story disappears completely. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the two kinds of becoming nobody. Tell me what you think in your experience, what you would say about what becoming nobody is.
Well, oh boy. So, I mean, to me, form is contained in emptiness, and emptiness is embedded in form. So, there's also, even though we're becoming nobody, there's a danger in spiritual bypassing.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, it's really easy to go to the tantric stage, the Vajrayana stage, and just say, I'm God, it's all the mother. But if you really haven't gone through the initiations of getting present and opening your heart, then there really is the danger of deluding yourself. And so, like in Tibetan Buddhism, before you get the empowerment to become the deity, you do 1,000,000 mantras and 100,000 full prostrations. So that in the tantric stage, in the Vajrayana stage, then we're seeing it all as sacred. It's all the mother. It's beyond pure and impure. But there's even still then there's me who's the deity, and becoming nobody is going into the non-dual, where in Dzogchen or Mahamudra or Mahaati, which is certainly what the 16th Karmapa talks about and what Mingyur Rinpoche teaches, and some other really wonderful teachers, Sokni Rinpoche, Eckhart Tolle, that we still have this ego structure, we're still having a body, we're still doing those things, but there has been this deep realization, not just an understanding, but this full getting that there is not something that's separate. And in fact, modern quantum mechanics is saying exactly what ancient tantric wisdom says, is that there is not an objective reality out there, and that we are not separate beings. So that people are living in this materialistic worldview, and it's certainly the medical model, that we're separate and that we're receiving through our senses what's going on in the external objective world. When in fact, we are consciousness, and consciousness is flowing through the Raghu filter and the Ram Dev filter, and it's going out and creating reality. It's completely the opposite. So that there's not really a me. It's just consciousness flowing through this Daleness or this Ram Devness or this Raghu-ness or whatever it is. And I remember one time we were at Brindavan, and Maharaji had disappeared into his room, and we were all baking over there on the patio or that deck or whatever that thing was, and somebody poked their head out and says, Maharaji says you can come. So I led the charge. I was the first person to cross the courtyard there, and I came into the door, and like it seemed like I surprised Maharaji, which I don't know what that even means, but he looked up and he looked at me, and there was nobody there, and it was almost kind of scary, because he could also be very personal. You know, he'd be concerned, are you warm enough? Do you need a sweater? Are you hungry? Would you like some food? But in that moment, it was like looking into a bottomless expanse of void. And I remember another time we were in also in Brindavan, and he jowed us all for a few days. So one of the devotees, Krishna Priya, decided, well, she loved Maharaji so much that if she disobeyed the order, he would still love her. So she decided to climb over the wall. The temple's surrounded by a wall to keep out the quoits and the monkeys and who knows what. Right?
Krishna Priya.
So she's crawling over the wall, and Maharaji sees her, and he tells the chowkidar, the gatekeeper, he gets all mad, get her out of here, get her out of here. And then he turned to somebody and said, they don't understand, they think I'm this body.
Really? Whoa. Oh,
So,
I never heard that.
so I've got a Maharaji picture on my desk right now. I mean, here's my Maharaji picture on my desk,
Mm,
right? But at the same time, it's like less and less do I think about stories from India. It's more this embodied consciousness that's everywhere, that's everybody and nobody. And I remember for the longest time after I left India, I really felt very close relationship with Maharaji. It's like I dream about him, I think about him, I've had visions of him. And then at some point, rather abruptly, it's like he disappeared. And I thought, I'm a really bad devotee. I'm not meditating enough. He told me to meditate. I got to try harder. And so I like ramped it up for a year. He never showed up again. And then I had this epiphany that he was saying, it's time for you to jump out of the nest and for you to fly. It's like, I'm still here, but it's not in that personal way anymore. It's you got to embody that now. It's not like you're waiting and being a devotee. It's like, be Ram Dev, be out in the world. Let go of all that I'm somebody and you're somebody.
mm. The pool of empty. I've told a lot of on a bunch of podcasts. I probably told you, but I once asked Roshi Joan Halifax on a podcast. You've been with Ramdas so long. Of course, you've known about Neem Karoli Baba, and you've seen pictures forever. What is your relation to this? I mean, what do you get or not get? She said, when I look into his eyes, all I see is emptiness. And I yep, that that is it. Of course, not the nihilistic everybody out there emptiness, but I love Bob Thurman's his little catchphrase is emptiness is the womb of compassion, womb of bliss and compassion. So yeah, good
and
description.
and emptiness could have also been translated as fullness or completeness in a
Yeah,
certain way.
right.
So I mean, it may be unfortunate. I mean, for the longest time, I was kind of put off by the fact I was supposed to be empty. It
Mm,
sounded, I took it in the nihilistic way in my naivete.
yeah, no, we all did. We all did. Um, I just wanted to bring up something. So and you mentioned him before, Mingyur Rinpoche, who we just love and have had on Mindrolling. It was one of the most wonderful podcasts that I've ever done, just by virtue of being in the presence. He was in Nepal, he was in Kathmandu, and it was as good as this as we are right now in terms of the reception and everything else. So we got his. He's just. I mean, I think you've seen him in.
I've done a retreat with him. I did a lot of
Uh-huh.
retreats with his brother, Sokni,
Oh, with Sokni, yeah. So
who's actually doing an online retreat right now.
yeah, I think I saw that. Um, anyhow, I just saw something that he had written for one of the Buddhist magazines, and I thought there was some really cool stuff in here that we could jump off of. Particularly, he was talking about how in the West, particularly, of course, meditation an infatuated madness here, going with all the apps and the meditation. I mean, it's really something. So he says the real power of meditation isn't in the method; it's in shifting our perspective. So this goes really to the heart of what I started. We started to talk about getting glued to your story and so on, and we talked about perspective, and in Mahayana, he called this quote unquote the view. I love the view is not a technique. It's how we see ourselves and how we relate to our own thoughts and emotions. Without a shift in our view, even the most powerful meditation techniques will just reinforce old patterns and habits. What's your response around that? I mean, it's a fairly radical thing to say.
Well, when you go to these Dzogchen retreats, it's really all about the view.
Hmm.
And the notion is that there's somebody there, there's a Lama who's had this transmission himself or herself, but it's almost always a himself. And the first session together, he directly transmits the view that is, so
Yeah, let's
let,
talk about the view. We got to talk about what the view is really.
let me back up. So that initially, before people are practicing, people are really caught up in the content of their experience. Here's a good experience, here's a bad experience, here's a pleasant one. And as we begin to practice, we become more identified with the knower than the known, where I am the observer. I'm not just that stuff, I'm the observer. We're into the Hinayana, Mahayana stages. I'm the compassionate observer. But then eventually, with the view, we're beginning to see that that it's not so much the experience or the experiencer, but that the nature of each arising itself. So, like right now, you're listening to the sound of my voice, and I'm talking and I'm talking, and you're hearing and you're hearing. What is it that continues if I stop talking? There's a quality of pure awareness that's there, whether I'm talking or I'm not talking. And that quality of pure awareness or beingness or presence or grace or whatever you want to call it is easier to notice in the gaps between the thoughts, between the breaths, between the sense sensations. But it's there even during the talking and the listening and the breathing and the thinking. So that this sense of the view is that we begin to be with Rigpa. We begin to be with the awakened quality of experience rather than being identified with thinking mind, with ordinary mind. So that right now, you and I could be here. Suppose Maharaj were in the room, he'd be hearing the same stuff going into his ears and going into his brain, but he wouldn't be caught up in the content in that way. He would be with the divine nature or the empty nature, depending on what, if you're coming from a Buddhist or a devotional direction. So that the view is continually seeing the nature of things. You look at the nature of things. You don't keep looking, look. But then you let go of the looker, and there's just being with the nature of things. And if you get caught in thinking something solid, you liberate that caughtness and come back to just seeing the nature of things. So that these Dzogchen retreats are incredibly relaxing, because even the place you're caught is it. There's nothing
It's okay.
There's nothing you can be experiencing that is not it. That I am that I am. So that Ramana Maharshi does it from another angle. Who am I? And it's not an intellectual question. It's what is this I that's experiencing? So that your body is an object. You can pay attention to your body. Your mind is an object. You can pay attention to your mind. What is the I? What is the you? What is the subject? And as we begin to see that it's just pure consciousness, then the view begins to arise in a very natural way.
Mm. And the view is a perspective from which we see from our quote unquote I. And let's talk about, I think I did something earlier today around the film again, and it was, she was kind of saying, what's the thing? What is the legacy? In this case, a legacy of Ramdas, but it's what is our legacy, or what is where all of this comes from and manifests itself? And I, here through all of us that have come back to the West. And I said, I really believe there is one unique thing, which is the wisdom of Buddhism meeting the heart of Bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion. And that combination is really something special. And many of us have, and you're one of us, talking about taking teachings from Dzogchen,
Yeah.
and but many of us have in one way or another, with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which I've done a lot as well over the years. So yeah, what is your take on this blend that seems to be a deep part of who we are and what we share?
Well, I was raised as a Christian, and I really am Bhakta. I love Maharaji more than anything. At the same time, my mind was a complete mess. It's getting a little better. I spent 10 years studying mathematics at Cal and Stanford. I don't know if you can imagine what that
That
did.
could do it,
I
yes.
guess you can imagine because you saw the result of it there when I got
Yeah.
there. And so I love Christianity. In fact, much to my chagrin, when Maharaji gave me a mantra, he gave me a Christian mantra, which I had been trying to escape from as fast as my legs could carry me. I wanted some more sexy Hindu mantra. He gave me a Christian mantra, right?
What was
And
that?
huh?
What was that?
What was what? The mantra?
Yeah.
I'm
It's
not
not.
gonna I'm not gonna tell you.
No, come on. This isn't.
It's a secret mantra. You don't tell your mantra over the podcast.
Okay.
Anyway, the point is that Maharaji teachings were really simple: love, serve, remember. And Christian teachings are forgiveness and compassion and love, but there's not a lot of technology there. Whereas in Buddhism, there's this incredible technology. So I have these ongoing groups. I have this website. I run the Living Dying Project. Let me give myself a plug here.
Please do.
Uh, I run the Living Dying Project, which Stephen Levine Ramdas and I started long, long ago. The first organization in America to promote conscious dying. So there's this website, livingdying.org. I have one of the podcast channels on the Be Here Now network called Healing at the Edge. And we have an online workshop with a live interactive component to it. And so in my teaching, and I've been doing a lot of teaching and guiding people and teaching people to guide the dying, I really base it on Tibetan Buddhism, but I talk about it in devotional terms. I take the structure of Buddhism and use Judeo-Christian plus Hindu devotional notions. And to me, that is really a very powerful amalgam. And on top of that, here's another part that it's more than Buddhism. Uh, all these Buddhist and Hindu practices were put together by and for people who were walking around barefoot, were grounded and centered, loved their mommy and daddy, and didn't have an iPhone. Right? So very little of this spiritual literature talks about becoming embodied and getting grounded and getting centered, which is the somatic equivalent of the Hinayana invocation trust vipassana stage. So that until you become embodied, it's really very difficult to surrender into the boundless sky of heart or into the tantric devotional kind of thing. And even in working with dying people, very often people are approaching death and they're not even in their body yet. Right? So it's difficult to fully avail yourself of the spiritual opportunity that the dying process can present if you don't even have a relationship with your body very much. So I've been finding that for a lot of people, even particularly meditators, that it's very useful to get into your body before you do this letting go. One therapist, Buddhist therapist, and I said, you have to become somebody before you can become nobody.
Yeah.
So Ramdas is talking about becoming nobody, but he spent a lot of time becoming somebody. He was a psychology professor. He spent a lot of time, he was successful in the world. And the people that I've met who have the easiest time on the spiritual path are people who have really become somebody. They're successful in the world. They're not trying to get away from their poverty or their bad relationships or their confused mind. They're pretty together, integrated in a personality sense and a success in the world kind of way.
Yeah.
So then they can start letting go of all that stuff. And so this becoming nobody, if you haven't done the becoming somebody, it's very, very complicated. And so so in one way we could say the spiritual path is moving from identification with our separate self to identification with true nature. And as we're letting go of identification with separate self, if we're really neurotic, it's going to get very messy really early on.
Yeah, very messy. Jeez. Um,
You sound like you're speaking from experience.
yes, yes, my brother. Um, actually, that is a wonderful thing that you just wrapped. It is very important. This thing about you do have to become somebody before that somebody can be relinquished.
Exactly.
Yeah. So very good.
So
Use them.
before you mention the
Yep.
16th Karmapa,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I met him on some of his first visits to America. And at one point, we were in a small shine room on the San Francisco Peninsula, and he was going to do an empowerment. And the deal was that to have the empowerment, you had to take refuge first. So he said, all the people who have taken refuge get over on this side of the room, and all the people that haven't get on the other side. And I had taken refuge with Kala Rinpoche already. So I got over on the side where you'd taken refuge. And he was on the other side taking a snip of hair and doing something with each person. And I was right on the aisle, but I was clearly on the I've taken refuge side. And he took one look at me and he started laughing, and he cut off some hair and gave me refuge again. And
Wow.
my feeling was that he recognized me, and he was laughing like, "Oh, what a weird incarnation for you this time." You know that th-
Wow.
that I had been like a somebody that he had known, like a Tibetan or something or another. So that, and in fact, I had the great privilege to walk around Mount Kailash with Roshi Joan,
Mm.
Halifax, and we also walked around Lake Manasaravar as part of that pilgrimage. And there's one point there in Tibet on the side of that lake where the story goes that that's where Hanuman did a lot of puja up in this place in Tibet.
Mm.
And so, I mean, and you could feel, I mean, I thought maybe I'm imagining things, but you could really feel Hanuman there.
Mm.
So, I mean, it's not really that Tibetan Buddhism and Maharaji and Hinduism and Christianity are different things, but that I think the West is now, how can I say this, that we can combine things in a wiser way. That time's a wasting. We don't have the option, most of us, to go on really long retreats for 6 months at a time anymore. We don't go off to India for a year or two like we did when we were young.
Mm.
So how can we, not that there's a shortcut, there's no shortcut, but there can be avoiding roadblocks and detours.
Mm.
Can we use this Buddhist technology to let go of the story, to become nobody, to be with what is, let go of the story, have compassion, and then go into this tantric devotional stage, and from there open up into the nobody stage of non-duality?
Mm. One of the other things that's a very common concept, of course, Buddhist concept, Buddha nature, that Mingyur talks about. There was some really great things in here. And basically, he says the seeds of compassion are present in our very simple wish to avoid pain and discomfort. Love is present in the movement towards happiness and fulfillment. And I think this goes a long way to say a little bit about we were just talking about and what you were just expressing. But yeah, let's talk about that, because I mean, he also says that we think we are just bad guys and girls here all the time, we have a view that we are fundamentally flawed, right? And letting go of that view is not easy at all. It's the message we're not good enough and we never will be. And um, he says, if we don't question this assumption, meditation can easily become a subtle form of aggression.
Mm-hmm.
Speak to that a minute, because I think that's very incisive.
Yeah, well, I mean, meditation can just be another technique to fix the place where we're not good enough. I
Mm.
remember once we were sitting in front of Maharaji, and Ramdas was having a particularly bad day. He was really upset, and he came up to Maharaji and he said, "Maharaji, I'm so impure. and he had on long sleeves, and Maharaji pulled his sleeve and looked up his sleeve and said, "I don't see any impurity."
Yeah, I was there in that moment, by the way. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, I fully get what Mingy was saying, but for me, having Maharaji love me and being with him and sitting in front of him and feeling inadequate or horny or agitated or whatever, and he kept loving me completely, no matter what. And then there were some other people in the satsang that I didn't even particularly like. I won't mention any names, wouldn't you? But he loved them just as much as he loved me. And I thought, how could he love that idiot, right?
Yeah, I know
it. So that unconditional love is always available, whether you went to India or whether you love Maharaj or whether you love Christ. And in a way, one of the deepest meditation practices is to just sit and be with what is, without any judgment, without trying to improve anything, just getting real with what it is that we're experiencing moment to moment. We're not trying to concentrate more and be more fully with our breath. We're not trying to understand something. We're just being with what is, which in a way is trusting the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, trusting the fact that freedom does exist. The Buddha nature is inherent, and that there is this way to it, and that there is the Sangha. And one time, the Buddha's attendant and nephew, Ananda, came to the Buddha and said, "Oh, Buddha, I've heard somebody said that the Sangha," their word for the satsang, "is fully half of the spiritual path."
Mm.
And the Buddha said, "Oh, no, Ananda, it is all of the spiritual path."
Yeah, yeah.
So that what we're talking about is really great, but it's very, very, very difficult to do on your own.
Yeah.
Mayor Baba said, "Love is contagious. Those who haven't got it catch it from those who do."
Yeah.
So somehow being in the satsang, being with you, like I was down in Ojai a couple of weeks ago with my son, and these groups I teach where we get together, it's so much easier then to let go of I'm alone with my suffering. Gurdjieff said the first thing we have to do on the spiritual path is let go of our identification with our suffering. Easier said than done.
Yeah, right. But I just going to second that motion about a satsang sangha community with like-minded people. I don't. I mean, we got that message, of course, from the earliest days of being in India around Maharaji. You've given some. I turned to people I didn't even like, and I felt this explosion in my heart. Yeah.
Right.
So that's all real, and we've, I guess one of the things that we've done since we come back is we've kept it going. We've kept it going in many different ways. You're doing it right now through the center.
Yeah.
And we're doing it through Love Serve Remember and the stuff we do with Ram Dass. But beyond that, just the way we were together last weekend or 2 weekends ago, whatever it was, is so nourishing. And I encourage everybody, whatever you can do, that's the basis of making any kind of strides that start to help with the detachment from the suffering of being self-cherishing, which is a Buddhist concept, but I love that, self-cherishing. And by the way, we have through ramdas.org, which is my other hat, other than this podcast hat, if you write to info@ramdas.org and say, is there a community in my neighborhood, wherever you may be, we have a fellowship, and somebody will get in touch with you and help hook it up. Or even it just takes two, right? Christ said, where two or more gathered in my name, there I am. So you could even start it, and then somebody else will write in from, Columbus, and you're in Columbus. Oh, I don't know why I thought of Columbus, but
what's the thing in the Ramayana where Ram gives Hanuman the boon that you will always be on the physical plane, And wherever, what is it, 2 or 3 people are singing praises to Ram, you will be there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Beautiful. No, there's one thing just before we leave our podcast. There is one thing that I really got from Minger's article. He said, Buddha nature is not a better way to play the same old game.
He's great.
I mean, where's he coming up with these kind of idiots? They're very Western. Somebody's working with him there or something. Well, the book he wrote, which I absolutely recommend to everybody, right? In Love with the World. Okay, get that book. That is one of the greater books I've read, because it's engaging, because he tells his story of being often away from the monastery as a sadhu, begging for 4.5 years. So, and in between all of that, he's got these wonderful teaching stories and so on. He made it all. It's a teaching, and that's how he did it, including almost dying. So Buddha nature is not a better way to play the same old game. It's an entirely different game. The principle of Buddha nature invites us to explore our experience in a new way, not with an eye to correcting what's wrong, but noticing what has always been right. That's a huge shift in the old view, okay?
Well, that's what the view is, Robert. That is the view that
That
we're
is the
talking
view.
about half an hour ago.
Right. Okay. That is the view. Okay. So shift in perspective to the
To the
view.
view.
Okay. I got it. Now I'm a slow learner, but I'm getting it. But how many of us absolutely, no matter what, go to the most pessimistic bullshit or to the darkest thoughts, and we dwell on all of that, because that's a big part. I mean, it's like changing. You get into these habitual patterns, right? And changing is like, you feel uncomfortable. There's a comfort with some of this bullshit that we are living day to day, moment to moment. So I love this little thing. Just make that little shift to the view. That's what we got to call this thing, right?
However, shifting to the view is scary because we are comfortable in the prison of our suffering.
Yeah, I just said that. Yeah.
I know you did. I am seconding the motion, as you said.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time in Egypt where they were going to create this big hydroelectric dam or somewhere in that neighborhood, and it was going to create a lake that was going to drown a lot of large mammals. So they tranquilized, encaged, and transported these, I don't know, lions and I don't know what it is, but they moved them 100 miles to a very similar place that was not going to be under the lake. And they opened up the cages, and the animals didn't want to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And when people get released from prison, some guys would rather stay in prison than go out into the unknown world.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Wow. So you guys that are listening know that we're going to link up Ram Dev with you in terms of the work that he does, and there's some great workshops that he's doing, I think coming up at the end of the year or the beginning of next. And Ram Dev works, of course, with us and doing retreats and so on, and you'll probably hear about that. But certainly, if you're interested in doing more work around transition, and yeah, just a little bit, just say, because I know you never like me to say that you are involved in strictly in working with death, that you are involved with working with love.
I'm really not interested in death. I'm interested in awakening, in spiritual transformation. And very often, until people really know they're going to die, in fact, Trungpa Rinpoche said, until you have an intimate relationship with death, your spiritual practice will have the quality of you being a dilettante. So we talked about Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana, but in Tibetan Buddhism, before even the Hinayana stage, there is motivation. There are the mind-turning truths. One of them is you're going to die, but you don't know when. So if you and I really knew that, Raghu, that we don't know we're going to get out of this podcast alive, how would that affect the way we were loving each other right now? Roger Ebert, the film critic, had this really wicked kind of cancer, and he was typing out some response to some questions about how he was doing for a article, and he was typing, as I'm typing the sentence, I don't know if I'm going to be alive to type the period at the end of the sentence. So the fact that we know we're going to die, we know that intellectually, but there's this really deep unconscious assumption that it's not now, it's not in the next hour, it's not today. I got these plans for tonight. And yeah, I mean, obviously you still have to have plans, but if we really, really didn't know how long we were going to die, that shoots you into the view.
Shoots you. It's a rocket to the view.
And the second of the mind-turning truths is that life is precious. This moment is the only moment in which we can awaken. Life is so precious. It's so precious to have a human incarnation where the mind is clear enough, where the heart is open enough, the body's strong enough. You're living in a country where the government's not cracking down on you. You're able to spend some time listening to podcasts rather than keeping your children from starving to death. A lot of people in the world don't have this luxury. You're going to die, but you don't know when. Life is precious. There's karma and there's suffering. These are taken as contemplations. So take one of those. Take the contemplation, you're going to die and you don't know when, and let that bounce around the back of your brain pan for the next month or two. And how does that affect your relationships? How does that affect what happens when you wake up in the middle of the night? How does it affect this place where you say, I'm kind of a schlump and I'm this way and that way? I mean, is there really time for all this self-flagellating, this victimhood? It's like, hey, let's get on with it. You know, we're going to die. And that's not necessarily a morbid thing. It's really like, you know, Don Juan carried death as the visor over his left shoulder. So I'm really interested in Tantra and devotion and love and enlightenment. And that death is the fact we're going to die, and being around dying people is motivating. The most beautiful Americans I've ever been around, with very few exceptions, are people who are almost dead.
Americans? Why do you, instead of people in general? What?
Well, because I'm saying, you know, I mean, I'm not bringing in the Karmapa and the Dalai Lama and Maharaji, but Westerners, the most beautiful Westerners I've been around are people who are approaching death because they've let go of, I'm fat, I'm thin, I'm rich, I'm poor, I'm ugly, I'm good looking. I mean, not all of them, but some of them are finding the view just through their relationship with their disease. So the Living Dying Project is it's not a depressing thing. It's not morbid. It's not about helping you die well. It's about helping you awaken in the context of having a life-threatening illness. So that you're not deciding between living and dying. You're working with healing at the edge. Everybody wants to heal, even right up to a few hours before dying, becoming more whole.
Beautiful. Ram Dev, thank you.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll see you all Mindrolling on Be Here Now Network, and check out Ram Dev's podcast, Dale Borglum,
Healing at the Edge.
All right, I got it. All right, thank you, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.